Hi there, welcome back to another video from Desi Suma. I hope you're doing great. Welcome back. I'm really happy that you're here tonight. Before we begin, I would like you to get comfortable. Maybe adjust your pillow, pull your blanket a little closer, and allow yourself to relax. There isn't anything you need to do right now, nor where you need to be. For the next little while, it's just you, my voice, and tonight's story. Yeah. Take a slow, comfortable breathe in and breathe out. Gentle, gently breathe out. One more time. Slow breathe in and slowly breathe out. Now, if you'd like, you can gently close your eyes. It's up to you. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, I would recommend you to do that. Okay, now tonight, imagine you're standing on a deck of a small ferry. The sun is beginning to set. A cool breeze from the sea. Can you feel that? You can hear gentle sound of the waves touching side of the boat. Not loud, just enough to remind you that you are surrounded by the ocean. As the ferry moves forward, you notice a small green island appearing in front of your vision. From far away, it doesn't look unusual. Just another island covered with trees and greenery. Uh, but hidden beneath those trees is an entire forgotten town in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a place that was once one of the most important locations in the Andaman Islands. Tonight I am going to tell you a story of Rose Island, now called as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Island. It's the official name. It has been renamed in the recent past by the Indian government. So it's a place filled with history, all buildings, towering banyan trees, friendly tears, and stories that many people have forgotten. This is the aerial photograph of the Rose Island. It's just located 2 kilometers from Port Blair. The ferry ride only takes around 10 minutes, 10 to 15 max. It's a short journey that many visitors don't realize they're traveling to a place, the general place completely different from what they are seeing in the Port Blair. What they when they arrive at Andaman Nicobar Islands, many people are aware of Port Blair, but this is a kind of a forgotten island in the Andaman Islands. So many people don't realize they're traveling to the place that completely changed the history of Andaman Islands. The island itself is actually very small. You could easily walk around it in less than an hour. But don't let the size fool you. For almost 100 years, this tiny island controlled the administration of entire Andaman colony. Government officers lived here, important meetings were held here, ships arrived here, messages were sent from here. In many ways, Rose Island was the heart of British rule in the Andaman Islands. So the island was named after Captain Daniel Rose. He wasn't the founder of the settlement. Instead, he was a Scottish marine surveyor who spent years mapping the waters around the islands. Okay, back then, accurate maps were incredibly important. Large ships carrying people, food, buildings, materials, and supplies need safe routes, safe waterways. Captain Rose helped create those maps, and because of this work, island was eventually named after him, Rose Island. If you had visited Rose Island more than 150 years ago, you would have seen something completely different from what exists today. So instead of ruins, you would have found beautiful houses, neatly maintained roads and gardens, tall coconut trees, government offices, a church, a school, a bakery, even a ballroom, a tennis court. It probably would have felt like a remote island at all. It would have looked like a European town, placed carefully in the middle of the Bay of Bengal. It's difficult to imagine that now because today the forest has almost completely taken over. I can show you a comparison photo if you'd like to, but that's going to be a AI generated one. I cannot use um, real pictures on my video because that might end up in a copyright strike. So bear with me there. I'm not sure how many of you. I have seen few comments that people doesn't prefer AI generated images, but just for the illustration part, I would like to experiment doing that. Do let me know what you think about that. Okay, so that's the comparison photo. So Rose Island, then was if you visit today, the first thing you will probably notice is the silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, a peaceful one. You will hear the birds singing, the deers walking around, leaves moving, gentle breeze from the sea, uh, the occasional call of peacocks. And if you listen carefully, you might even hear the sound of the deers walking through. They walk through the old pathways, and I could see people, tourists who visit the island these days, taking pictures of that. It's hard to believe that these same paths were once busy with soldiers, government officers, families, workers, and visitors going about their everyday lives. So, how did this tiny island become the center of British power in the Andaman Islands? When I say it became the center of British power, it's not in India. I'm just referring to the center of power in the Andaman Islands. And why did everyone eventually leave? The answers take us back to one of the most important events in the Indian history. The year was 1857 and everything was about to change. 1857, across India, a great uprising had begun. Today, it's remembered as the Indian Rebellion of 1857 or India's first war of independence. Soldiers, local rulers, and ordinary people rose against the British East India Company. The fighting lasted for many months. When it finally ended, the British regained control. But they had another problem. Thousands of people had been arrested. Some were soldiers, some were revolutionaries, some were political prisoners, and others had been convicted of serious crimes. The British government wanted a place where these prisoners could be sent far away from the mainland India, a place so isolated that escaping would be almost impossible. And that's when their attention turned toward the Andaman Islands. At that time, Andaman Islands were covered with a dense forest. There were no airports, no large towns, no modern roads, only thick jungles, beautiful beaches, and the endless sea. The journey from mainland India took many days by the ship. For anyone sent there as a prisoner, returning home would be was almost impossible. The British believed this was the perfect location for a penal colony, a place where prisoners could be kept far away from society. This is an illustration of how prisoners were arriving by ship. In 1858, the first group of prisoners arrived by sea. Imagine standing on the shore, watching a large wooden ship slowly come to a stop. The prisoners stepped into the land, uncertain about what awaited them. Many of them would never see their families again. Life was about to become very, very difficult. The forests has to be cleared, roads had to be built, buildings has to be constructed, and much of this work was done by the prisoners themselves. Day after day they worked under tropical sun. The air was humid, mosquitoes were everywhere. The work was exhausting, yet slowly the island began to change. At first, there were only simple wooden structures like this. Temporary shelters were there, storage buildings, basic offices. But as the years passed, the British had much bigger plans. They didn't want just a small settlement, they wanted a proper headquarters, a place where the senior officers could live comfortably, a place that reflected the power of the British Empire. One building became two, then five, then 10. Stone replaced by, wood was replaced by stones. Gardens appeared, roads became wider, large rainwater tanks were built to collect fresh water. Workers planted shade trees along the pathways. The island was slowly becoming a small town. As more officials arrived, Rose Island continued to grow. There was a church where family gathered every Sunday. There was a bakery that filled the island with the smell of fresh bread. There were offices where government decisions were made. And there was even a printing press that produced official documents. Everything a British administration needed was there or built there. It may sound surprising for such a tiny island, and you should remember it was in the early 1800s, where it's much more different from the present times. But Rose Island was carefully planned. Every building had a purpose. Every pathway connected important places. Nothing was built by accident. There are still ruins of this church and bakery when you visit the Rose Island. If you were walking through the Rose Island more than a century ago, you might have heard the church bells ringing in the distance. You might have smelled freshly baked bread coming from the bakery. You might have seen officers walking to work and children heading to school, and they played beneath the coconut trees. It would have seemed peaceful, orderly, almost like a quiet English village, but beneath this peaceful appearance, there was another story. Almost everything you see was built through the hard work of prisoners. While British families enjoyed comfortable homes, many prisoners continued working from sunrise until sunset. It's it's a reminder that history often has more than one side. The same building that represented comfort for some represented hardship for others. Over time, Rose Island became more beautiful. Visitors who arrived by the ship were often surprised by what they saw: neatly kept gardens, wide roads, elegant buildings, palm trees swaying gently in the sea breeze. It is difficult to believe that all of this had been created on such a small island in the middle of Bay of Bengal. Soon people began giving Rose Island a special nickname, a nickname that reflected its beauty and elegance. They called it the Paris of the East. And now we shall explore what life was really like during these years when Rose Island was its most beautiful phase. We will walk through its grand ballroom, visit the Chief Commissioner's residence, see the bakery, the swimming pool, and discover why so many people consider this tiny island one of the most remarkable places in British India. So, as years passed, Rose Island continued to grow. More buildings appeared each year. More families made the island their home. By late 1800s, Rose Island had become the administrative headquarters of the Andaman Islands. It is no longer just a settlement. It had become a small community, a place where people lived, worked, raised families, and spent evening together. If you arrived by ship more than 100 years ago, this is what you might have seen: rows of elegant buildings looking out towards the sea, palm trees moving gently in the breeze, stone pathways connecting one building to another, beautiful gardens carefully maintained every single day. It was neat, organized, peaceful for many visitors. For many of them, it has been difficult to believe that they were standing on such a remote island. The most impressive building on Rose Island was the residence of the Chief Commissioner, though. This was home for the highest ranking British official in the Andaman Islands. The house stood proudly on higher ground overlooking the sea. From the windows, the Chief Commissioner could uh, watch ships arriving and departing from the harbor. The building was surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. Flowers bloomed throughout the year. Visitors often describe the residence as elegant and beautifully designed. Today, only parts of those walls remain standing, but if you look closely, you can still imagine what it once looked like. Now it's all covered by the banyan tree roots, by the giant banyan tree roots like that. One of the most remarkable things about Ross Island today is that nature didn't simply destroy these buildings. Instead, it slowly embraced them. The giant banyan trees wrapped their roots around the walls, the windows, the staircases. Sometimes it almost looks as though the trees are holding the buildings together. Many visitors say it feels as if the island has become one giant living museum. One of the island's most beautiful building was the church. Every Sunday, families gathered here. The sound of church bell would travel across the island. Inside, wooden benches filled with sunlight shone through large stained glass windows. It must have been a peaceful place. Today there is no roof, no glass, no wooden benches, only stone glass, stone walls covered with vines and roots. And many visitors say that the ruins are much more beautiful than the original building. Nature has created its own kind of architecture, and just a small walk away from the church stood the bakery. Every morning, fresh bread was baked here. Imagine the smell of drifting. Imagine the smell of bread drifting to the island. Warm bread, fresh cakes, perhaps even pastries for the lunch or for the afternoon tea. It may sound ordinary today, but during the late 1800s, having a proper bakery on such a small island was considered quite impressive. The bakery served the officers, their families, and government staff. Life was surprisingly comfortable, especially considering how isolated the island was. Evening on Ross Island were often very social. There was a grand ballroom, British officers, their wives, and invited guests would gather there. Music filled the room, people danced, conversation continued late into evenings. So, just like that, for many years, life on Rose Island continued peacefully. Government officers went to work, children played in gardens, ships arrived regularly, bringing supplies, letters, and visitors from mainland India. It probably seemed as though life on island would continue like this forever. But history often changes when we least expect it. By late 1930s, the world was becoming an uncertain place. Tensions were growing between nations. Although Rose Island was small, it could not escape the events that were unfolding across the world. Then in 1941 something unexpected happened. A powerful earthquake struck the Andaman Island. The ground shook, buildings that stood for decades began to crack, walls shifted, roofs weakened, some structures were badly damaged. Although many buildings were standing still, Rose Island would never quite be the same again. Before repairs could truly begin, another event changed everything. So the earthquake struck on 1941 and caused serious damage to the buildings in the Rose Island, and before it could be restored, something else happened. The Second World War had reached Asia. In 1942, just a year after the earthquake, Japanese forces occupied the Andaman Islands. The British was overpowered by the Japanese troops and they did not had a sufficient force to defend them. So the British had to leave Rose Island for the first time in many years. Island was no longer under British control. The Japanese military recognized the island's location and began using it for defense. They constructed their bunkers, lookout points, and underground shelters. Some of those bunkers can still be seen today. If you walk around Ross Island, you will see small concrete structures hidden among the trees. Many visitors walk right past them without realizing they are looking at reminders of Second World War. For several years, the island became different. The music had stopped, the ballroom was empty, the gardens were no longer the center of daily life. Instead, the island became part of military outpost. When the war ended, the British returned briefly, but things had changed. Many buildings had already suffered the earthquake. Others had been neglected during the war. Restoring the entire settlement would require a great deal of time, money, and effort. Instead, the British decided to move their administrative headquarters to nearby Port Blair. Rose Island was slowly left behind. One family left, then another. Government offices were closed. The church became quiet. The bakery had stopped baking. The ballroom never hosted another evening dance. The island that had once been filled with conversation gradually fell silent. Years passed without people to maintain the buildings. Nature began its quiet work. Tiny plants appeared between cracks in the stone. Small roots grew deeper each year. Rain, wind, and the sunlight did the rest. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, the forest returned. One tree, one tree became the symbol of Rose Island, the banyan tree. Unlike many trees, the banyan sends roots down from its branches. These roots eventually become trunks themselves. Over many decades, these roots wrap themselves around the walls, windows, doorways, and staircases. It almost looks as though the trees have gently embraced the old buildings. Some visitors say the roots are protecting the ruins. Others say nature is simply reminding us that nothing lasts forever. Perhaps both ideas are true. Today, Ross Island is peaceful. Deer, deer wander freely through the old streets. Peacocks search quietly among the ruins. The only sound you will usually hear are birds singing, the breeze moving through the trees, and waves gently reaching the shore. Visitors walk slowly through the island. Some stop to take photographs. Others simply sit quietly and enjoy the peaceful surroundings. Many people say Rose Island doesn't seem like an abandoned place. Instead, they say that it feels like history and nature has learned to live together. As our ferry slowly leaves the island behind, take one last look at the shoreline. The old church, the chief commissioner's house, the banyan trees, the quiet paths. It's remarkable to think that all of this exists just a few minutes from the Port Blair, a place that once represented the height of British administration, is now one of the quietest places in the Andaman Islands. Rose Island reminds us that even the grandest buildings can become ruins, that even the most powerful empires eventually become history. And perhaps one reason people enjoy visiting the island so much, not because it's perfect, but because it tells a story without saying a single word. If you ever find yourself visiting the Andaman Islands, perhaps take a short ferry ride, walk slowly, listen carefully, look closely at the roots holding the old walls together. Imagine the life that once filled those quiet buildings. And for just a moment, allow yourself to step into another time. Thank you so much for joining me on tonight's journey through the fascinating history of Rose Island. I hope you enjoyed our quiet walk through one of the India's most unique places. Take care, sleep well, and I will see you soon, very soon, in our next ASMR story. Good night.